Social media platforms in a competitive commercial landscape require our constant attention. The longer you stay, the more you are susceptible to promoted content and ads. The best way to keep you there is to outrage and incite you. Anger feeds content, content feeds revenue. Muslims that engage on social media often contribute to the online antagonism that reflects the coarse and crude trends of wider society. It goes like this. Someone tweets a view, sometimes coherent and thought through, and sometimes not so. And within a short space of time, it solicits a torrent of abuse and angst. Before long, we feed off each other's outrage, borrowing anger and calling for retribution. This atmosphere leaves little for nuance, for clarification and engagement. Worse still, social media engagements help to engender a sense of disunity with which our ummah is now plagued, and benefits those actors that want to sow division within our ranks. If policymakers want to exacerbate divisions in our communities, Muslims on Twitter and Facebook are low-hanging fruits. This past week, I've witnessed such problematic social media disputes. A sister sent a tweet about women becoming huffaz. Maybe she could have phrased the message better and crafted it in a different way, but we're all guilty of that. Within time, she received a torrent of anger. Her point was lost. Any meaningful clarification was drowned out, and she became another victim of the contrived cancel culture. We see these types of debates all the time. A scholar sends out a message, and before long, his views are ridiculed with little consideration of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's limits. Somehow, we think our timelines are exempt from the angel's records. Sending people to the stocks did not start with social media. The Muslim Ummah today is undermined by its disunity, but certainly this acrimony is amplified by the anonymity of the medium, where an expert is ranked equally to a layman, and abuse, defamation and slander are a sure route to likes and followers. This week on the Thinking Muslim podcast, we look at Muslim Twitter. What causes this bitterness? How do we tone down the rhetoric? And how can the revelation and our illustrious scholarly past help us to rectify our manners of engagement? I have invited Justin Parrott to discuss this matter with me. Brother Justin holds an MRes in Islamic Studies from the University of Wales and is currently a research librarian for Middle East Studies at New York University in Abu Dhabi, and he's also a volunteer imam for the Muslim Students Association. He also runs an amazing website with a unique, accessible hadith repository. You can find him by going to his website address in the description of this program. Justin Parrott, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the Thinking Muslim podcast.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for inviting me.
Wa iyyakum. Now, Justin, I invited you really to discuss Muslim Twitter and the general interaction of Muslims on social media. The impression I get is it's a pretty messy place. And I read a tweet from you a few weeks back looking at or reflecting on the debate that takes place within the Muslim Twitter realm and how those debates are sometimes quite problematic. And in a way, some of your thoughts are accorded with mine. I mean, I think you expressed quite succinctly into words your current problem with Muslim engagement on social media.
Sure. So as I was thinking about this, just from my perspective, I just feel like there's a lot of negative content on social media. So there's all kinds of negativity on there, and there's things that are unfair, there's things that are untrue, there's backbiting. So maybe people are talking about somebody in a negative way, but that's actually backbiting, the things they wouldn't say to that person's face. There's also misinformation, there's also fake news, there's also horrible things happening everywhere in the world that we don't have control over, and we're exposed to all of that content. So at least my strategy in using social media and trying to benefit from it is to kind of curate your timeline to making sure that you're getting good, positive content from people who put that stuff out reliably, and just not to let yourself be exposed to the negativity and the things that are they're going to affect you. They're going to affect you in a negative way if you keep looking at that stuff. Another part, when as I was thinking about this, is that, and other people have talked about this, and this is not just for Muslims, but this is happening sort of on the internet culture, is what they call the outrage, the cancel, the call out culture. So there's a culture of sharing outrageous content, and that's people either being provocative because they want to get a response and get the attention, or that's people who are sharing the outrages of somebody else, and they go viral that way. So this has kind of happened in the culture, and there's a lot that people have talked about this, and I think it's just part of the nature of social media. It just lends itself to this type of content that goes viral. So I have a link here to a study that was done by an Italian university, and they did in multiple languages, and they looked at what is the type of content that goes viral on social media. And they said that the type of content that goes viral on social media are things that cause arousal and dominance. So these are the two psychological terms. So they cause arousal and dominance. So these types of emotions that are arousal and dominance. So an emotion that causes arousal is, like, for example, disgust. Content on social media goes viral because it disgusts people. So people see something outrageous. And then also anger. Anger is a dominant emotion. So, this is in contrast to fear. So fear is a submissive emotion that makes you want to withdraw, retract, kind of move away, to leave things, and anger makes you want to fight, right? So that's a dominant type of emotion. That's what that means here. So things that make you angry and things that make you disgusted are the things that go viral on social media. And of course, there's the happy stuff and cat videos and things like that. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of content, but this is where the outrage, cancel, call out culture comes from, because of the nature of things that go viral. It incites those negative emotions in people, and that's what makes them click on it, share, comment on it. And then, as you know, social media companies want you to comment, like, share as much as possible on the forum or on their platform. So that type of content, they're going to allow that stuff to go viral. They'll try to block fake news and stuff. We'll say that, but so this is just part of the nature of the platforms. So if we understand that, then we need to figure out that if we're going to use these tools, we have to curate our timelines. We have to make sure that we're not being misled by misinformation and fake news, that we're not being exposed to things that are designed to provoke a negative response from us. I try to follow Muslim scholars and Islamic pages, and they're putting out positive content, maybe some health news and like regular news, and other kind of mindfulness psychology pages. I follow that kind of stuff on Twitter. So all that stuff is stuff that doesn't make me angry and combative, right? So try to have the good content coming into your page if you're going to be using these things. And then one more point I want to make about the online environment is that we have this phenomenon that we call trolling. So this is when somebody goes into a forum or into a page or into its online space, and they go there to deliberately incite anger and to get a negative reaction out of people. Now, you got to understand where the term trolling comes from. So trolling is a fishing term. So that's when you put multiple lines of bait on the back of your boat, and then you drag it along. You're trolling the fish because you're trying to bait the fish. So that's where online trolling, that's where that term comes from. So a troll is somebody who goes into this online space, commenting under a Facebook post or a Twitter post or on a YouTube video or something like that. And they want to make people angry, and they want to say something outrageous so that they're getting that kind of negativity, and people enjoy that. I mean, the online trolls, they enjoy that, going in and making people upset. So there's just a lot of negative content out there. There's a culture that has arisen out of the way that things go viral, that are provoking these negative emotional responses. And then you have people who kind of feed off that and do that deliberately. They want to make people upset. So they're not trying to enlighten people or spread beneficial information. They're going to go in and they're going to quote, own the libs, or, you know, whoever their target is, they're gonna go in and you attack that group and make those people upset. So that's why it can be a negative experience for a lot of people. And I think this is why I'm not the only one who's concerned about quote unquote Muslim Twitter and what is going on there and what is said there. But I think it's the nature of the platform. I don't think that we can change that. It's just that's the platform kind of pushes us towards that trend, and we have to buck that trend if we're going to use these tools in a positive way. That's how I would put into words sort of the unease that I feel with being on social media.
I mean, social media is a very difficult minefield to navigate around, and I think I'm sometimes concerned about young people. They're constantly connected to social media channels, and they feel they constantly have to apply themselves to those channels, and that must take a lot of bandwidth away from that individual who is trying to pursue education or trying to pursue their lives, if they're having to engage with people on these networks.
Yeah, and I honestly, I started a Facebook page for the Hadith, and then people like that. So then I created a website to support the Facebook page. That was like my main platform. I was sharing Hadith, and then it kind of built up into these different platforms that I do now. And I don't feel like it would be right by the people who appreciate my content for me to just pull the plug on all that stuff. I mean, I don't like social media, honestly, and I wouldn't be on there if I didn't have to be, or if I didn't feel like it was my responsibility to kind of put some positive content out there. So it does make me uneasy. I don't read it often. I try to maybe look at it, Twitter once or twice a day, and look at Facebook once or twice a day. I haven't even bothered with looking at Instagram. I post stuff there, but I just don't have the time or the effort to figure that platform out. And I post some stuff on YouTube, and then I just check it regularly just to make sure people have not left nasty comments, which tends to happen. So I have these platforms, and I don't really like them. I don't use them for recreation like a lot of people do. I don't rely upon it. I mean, I wouldn't want to scroll through my feed for more than 15 minutes at a time, and doing that maybe twice a day at most. But I like to post positive content out there, and then it's taken me a while to figure out how to use all the tools to get to that point where I feel like I have a good social media strategy that works for me and is trying to be positive. I'm glad that we're having this discussion, because I do think that we need to, social media use is probably unavoidable for a lot of people, and then we need to know how to use these tools to get the most out of them, to make them work for us.
Does it reflect a wider problem within the Muslim mindset? We find it very difficult to navigate through our differences, and so has social media not just amplified our inability to debate in a civil way with one another?
Well, it's really revealing a lot of what was already there. So we're just more exposed to the types of negativity that have always been there. So in some ways, things haven't changed, and these are just reflect us becoming more aware through this connectivity of the way people debate and have these conflicts. But I think in some ways it's also amplified, and I'll tell you why. Because first of all, at least on Twitter and YouTube, you can be anonymous, and on Facebook you're supposed to use your real name, but you can be an unknown person. Like you don't really have to use your real name. This anonymity allows people to say things without any inhibition or consequences at all. So it would be, before the internet, there was social pressure. If you got up in the masjid and you started berating your imam, other people would be around you to stop you or to shame you or to run you out of there. There was a social pressure, and there was a consequence for you saying outrageous things or provoking conflict in public spaces, right? Now on the internet, when you have a lot of these anonymous Twitter accounts. Some of them are fake, by the way. Right. They're robots. But some of them, they're anonymous people on Twitter, so they say whatever they want, and they rip on this imam, and they attacking this person, and they're going after everybody, and they're saying things that they know are going to offend people and are going to be viewed as outrageous, and there's no consequence for it, at least in the dunya. Allah is watching all this and the angels are recording everything that we do. But there's no worldly consequence because it's an anonymous account. There's no one to shame that person's public reputation or whatever consequence there should be for the things they say. So because people can be anonymous on the internet, they're saying things that they wouldn't normally say, and then there's no sort of ordinary social pressure that would prevent people from saying this kind of stuff. So that's a factor I think that has amplified it and sort of made it worse, or made conflicts worse. And then another problem or reason why I think that has amplified the conflicts in society is because what happens is that people develop internet subcultures. So these are online spaces of like-minded users who share the content they agree with, and this is on the so-called alt-right, so sort of extreme conservative, and the so-called alt-left, it's sort of extreme liberal or progressive. So there's these spaces on both sides, and there's different Muslim spaces and all different kinds of little online spaces where people go to for like-minded content, and then they're not really exposed to opposing views, and they exist in what we call echo chambers. So everybody's just saying the same thing to each other. They also say living in a bubble, so to speak. So they go in there, and then they get they're exposed to this. I don't know if it rises to the level of propaganda, but they're exposed to this content that kind of only shows them one side of the world, and it even might be a distorted view. And then they go out, and then they might interact online with other people who are in a different echo chamber, and then those people clash, and there's no way for them to kind of see what each other's perspective. And then also another reason that this is why this promotes conflict is because the personal element has been removed. So you're just communicating through texts and pictures. You're not seeing a person's facial expression, their nonverbal communication. There's all types of nonverbal cues and ways that you communicate to people and reach out, connect to people that are nonverbal, non-text-based types of communication. And all of that is removed from social media and even email as well. So I actually wrote an article for a Library Science Journal about when I mentioned that how to use an email effectively. And one of the problems with that is that you have to have a personal connection with the person that you are emailing so that they can pick up your tone, inflection, different cues, expressions, and they know who this person is that they're talking about. Anyway, so that was just an article I wrote. But yeah, so that's why communication through social media is difficult, because and a lot of people, they wouldn't say what they say on social media to someone to their face. Yeah, so in that way, I think that the fault lines that are out there, they kind of reflect fault lines that have always been there. I mean, people have always kind of thought this way and had these types of conflicts, but it's changed and in some ways amplified because of the reasons that I mentioned.
And Justin, to what extent is our use of social media a reflection of the wider trend in Western liberal societies? We now have deeply polarized societies. In Britain, we have the Brexiteers and the Remainers, as you may know. And again, these fault lines have become deeply embedded. And to what extent are we merely a byproduct of that sense of acrimony that exists at the moment in wider Western culture?
I don't know if I'd say we are a byproduct, but I'd say that our community develops in parallel to sort of the broader trends in secular society. So, as you said, the fault lines now are between. It's even hard to kind of draw this because the old conservative liberal, those don't really. It's kind of more complicated than that, but let's just say that
right.
You have people on the right wing and the conservative wing, and then you have people on the left wing and conservative wing, and they're divided over a number of issues. And you have extreme poles, and then you have a lot of people in the middle. So you have the alt-right, and those people are extreme on immigration and things like that. And you have the alt-left, and those people have a very strong view of socialist policy that needs to be implemented, or or however. And then these people exist, as I mentioned earlier, in their online spaces where they're sharing like-minded content, and they have a difficulty engaging with other people and connecting with other people in a real sense. So we see that trend is kind of happening in the wider secular society, and then the fault lines that are existing now, at least on the on quote unquote Muslim Twitter, or on at least Muslims online, is that you have Muslims who have a view of politics that I would say maybe hardline politics, and then you have Muslims that are more influenced by the liberal side, and then you have a lot of people in the middle. So I think, in some sense, it parallels the fault lines of the wider society. So you have, I guess you would say, this is very simplified, but progressives and reactionaries. So progressives, they're trying to, they have these ideas, and they want humanity to progress, and they want things to get better, and they have these ideas, and this relates to their economic policies, culture, whatever. And then you have reactionaries, people who want to go back. Let's say, oh no, things are getting worse, we need to go back, right? So you have both sides of that kind of view. And I think, and that's just a super simplified way of putting it. I mean, it's just hard to do the whole thing justice in just by a couple of terms. But I do think we parallel the trends in the broader society, because I mean we are influenced by broader society, and we can't say that we're not, and that's not necessarily bad. We're human beings. There are common human cultures, and we exist in them, and some of those things can be accommodated by Muslims, and some things we need to reject as Muslims. But we're going to be affected by the way the wider society is going. So they're moving in this way with the secular politics, right, of the reactionaries and the progressives, and then those fault lines are now why they appear among Muslims as well.
Now, if the lack of civility exists in wider society when it comes to political and intellectual discourse, and we see that reflected, as you say, in Muslim society, is there a space for revelation here? Because, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this Quran as a way of measuring and as a way of dealing with the challenges human beings face. And these challenges are not restricted to time, but this revelation is eternal, and it will be with us until Yawm al-Qiyamah. And so how can we gain inspiration or guidance from revelation when trying to navigate around this sort of level of acrimony and debates that exist and persist in Muslim discourse?
Great. That's a great question. And I'd like to go a little bit in depth on that. I have some notes here. So, well, first of all, I wanted to make this point earlier, that social media, that makes you feel like you need to react to everything that you see on social media, and they want you to, the companies do. You don't have to react. Like, you don't have to comment on everything. You don't have to denounce every evil that is out there. It's just not even in our capacity to do that. Like, and a lot of the times it's just a waste of time, and it's not changing anybody's minds, wasting our time. We can do something better than fighting people on Facebook or Twitter. So we don't have to react to everything. We don't have to debate everything. And some things you just have to let go. Anyway, so back to what we were saying, like, what are the guidelines of debate or disputing, and how we talk to each other? So Imam al-Ghazali, he has in his book of knowledge, in the Ihya Ulumuddin, the famous work of his, he lists conditions for the permissibility of debate, so that a Muslim, if they're going to debate another Muslim on a theological, he's talking mostly about theology or law, but if they're going to debate a Muslim about another issue, they have to fulfill these conditions, or else they're not debating for the sake of Allah, he says. So the first one is that you want to have a sincere intention to find the truth, and even if the truth is coming from that other person. So if you're debating something, the intention isn't to win or to, quote, destroy that person, which is the way they make all these videos on YouTube of somebody's destroying somebody in a debate. We don't have that in Islam. If you're going to debate in Islam, it has to be to find the truth. And Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, he has this famous statement that he said, he debated people. He debated like other sects and things like that. And he said, I never debated anybody, but that I did not care if the truth came from their tongue or mine, right? So what he's saying is that if his opponent said the truth, he would acknowledge that truth, right? And so he wasn't trying to shame these people. He wasn't trying to destroy these people or humiliate them. He was just trying to get at the truth. And if they said something that was true, he would accept it, right? And he wanted them to acknowledge the truths that he was saying, right? So Al-Ghazali quotes that, and that's a really important piece of this whole thing. Some other conditions, he says, make sure you're not neglecting the important fara'id or the obligations. So, if you haven't taken care of your personal obligations, then you shouldn't be debating. If there are more important communal fard kifaya obligations, and those are not being met, and you're out debating with these people, then you need to go take care of those things. So he's sort of like saying, get your priorities in order. Like, you have to do the most important things, and like a lot of people waste their time with these debates, and they could be doing something more important. So that's another big piece. And then he says, this is important, that the people who are debating, they should have ijtihad they should have the capacity to perform ijtihad in their area of expertise. So that means they should be able to think independently of authorities in their chosen field. So like a mujtahid in fiqh is somebody who can derive rulings of Islamic law on their own from the text sources, from the usul, right? So that's a really high level of scholarship. And then we can transfer that to other expertise as well. I mean, the academic debates that happen like in forums, in Cambridge or wherever, they're between experts, right? And people who are recognized as experts in their field. So that's what a debate should be. It should be between people who are able to think independently in their field, not just people who are quoting others. Because then if you're just quoting others, you're not debating, you're sharing two other people's opinions, right? And those people aren't there to debate or clarify or however. So you should be, so if you're going to debate, you should be an expert in what you're debating, right? So that's another important piece. And then he says the matter should be practical. So he didn't like for people to argue about theoretical issues that might happen. So like some hypothetical legal case that might come up. He didn't like people to debate those things. If you debate something, it should be practical. It should be an actual case that needs an answer. So he didn't like to kind of just debate for things that have no practical purpose or implication. And then he says the debate should be between learned people from whom benefit is derived. Okay, that's another important thing. So when you have two good scholars and they're both benefiting people and they're debating an issue, we can watch it, we can learn from both of them because they're both going to bring good points, right? And then so that's when a debate is beneficial, right? When both people are making beneficial points and they're good scholars, they're known for being good for the Muslim community, putting out good information, good message, all that kind of stuff. So that's when a debate is positive because then both of the people bring their views of the truth together, and then you can synergistically kind of create a better understanding of the truth that comes from those two people in dialogue, right? So that's another big point, right? So and this is, and I'll just say here, this is not from Imam al-Ghazali, but this is something that I've learned and what I've picked up from people who have tried to debate, I guess, the neo-fascists and people like that. And the way that you win debates with them is not to debate them, because they're because they're dishonest. And I'm talking about true neo like Nazis and people who have these really extreme ideologies and anti-immigrant and racist, in fact. And those people are not honest actors. They don't argue in good faith. So they argue in bad faith, and they don't care about the facts, and they're not trying to get the truth. So don't argue with those people. And because you argue with them, you're legitimizing their platform, right? And you're just allowing them to spread their views even farther, right? So if you are certain that a person is a bad actor who argues in bad faith, then do not debate them, right? You can respond to them on your own platform, and you should. You respond to them in writing or make a video, but not including them, because if they're going to lie, then if you debate them, you give them a platform to spread their lies. Okay, so you should not debate people like that. So some of the debates out there, they're debating really questionable people, and like, I'm not going to debate an Islamophobe, somebody who I don't think cares about what Islam really teaches, or somebody who has some other views that I feel are in bad faith. I'm not going to debate those people. I'm not going to go give those people a platform, and I'm not going to allow those people to share their dishonest views on my platform. Okay, so I wouldn't debate those people. I would debate somebody who maybe was my friend. Well, obviously, if I was in areas that I'm competent to discuss, I would debate somebody who is my friend or colleague, who I might disagree with, but whom through our dialogue, I would intend to have a better understanding of the truth. And they might change my views, and I might change their views. But the goal isn't to win or destroy or humiliate. The goal is to get a better understanding of the truth by two people coming into dialogue and sharing their perspective. So yeah, so he says these are the conditions for debate, and if you understand this, then you can tell who's debating for the sake of Allah and who's debating for the sake of like their nafs or their lower self, right? Or for some other ulterior motive, right? So that's the criteria of what makes a debate Islamic. Like he puts these conditions there, and then he lists several evils of debate, or several more things that he's warning about, and I'll just list those. He said debates, they provoke envy, so you hate the other person that you're debating, and they might for whatever reason you're jealous of them, and you want them to kind of be deprived of their blessings. That's what envy means. Pride is another danger, so being arrogant, saying something arrogant. Rancor, so hiqad is when you just stubbornly refuse to forgive somebody, and you have kind of just holding this hatred in your heart, like having a grudge. So these bitter debates produce that, and that is spiritually ruinous and dangerous to have that in your heart, to have this kind of rancor in your heart. Backbiting is as a result of debate. So remember, backbiting is to say something negative about somebody that you wouldn't say to their face, or that they would be displeased if you said it to their face. And that's a serious sin in Islam. And there's people that go to the hellfire just because they did that, even if it's truthful, right? Because you're attacking the reputation of that person without a right. Now, the scholars, of course, they give exceptions to that rule. So, for example, if somebody is really out there spreading dangerous ideas and we respond to them in public, that's not backbiting. If somebody is proposing to another person in marriage and you know that person's a bad person and you tell them, that's not backbiting. So if there's any reason where like the public good overrides this rule, then that's not backbiting and you're allowed to say that. But I'm going to say that is the exception. That is not the general rule. So the general rule and the safest thing for us is not to just speak badly about any Muslim, right? Or any person, any normal person who's not like an evil person, right? It just don't even get into the habit of it, right? Because what people do is they see, oh, this is the exception to the rule, and oh, I'm justified in saying this and this and this and this, and then they get in the habit of backbiting. And maybe they did it a few times, it's permissible, but then you get into that habit, and then you're gonna transgress that habit, and you're gonna fall into the sinful backbiting. So just don't even make it a habit, right? Let's follow the general rule. Let's just not speak badly about anybody, and let's not make it a habit, right? And let's not indulge in that, because then if you indulge in it, you're gonna, even if at the beginning you're justified, you're eventually going to transfer. These are the evils of debate that we need to watch out for. And the other one is self-righteousness, or was basically like claiming tazkiyah for yourself, claiming that you're pure spiritually. So you're pure spiritually and you're righteous so much that you can look down on these people and you be arrogant to them and dismiss them and things like that. And that's another sin, you know. وَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ, Allah says in the Quran, right? Do not claim purity for yourself. And that's just being self-righteous. In English, we say somebody's being self-righteous because they're acting so much better than other people. And then the new term for that is virtue signaling, is what people say. So people go out and denounce people in a way that makes them look good, right? So we got to watch out for that, right? Then another evil of debates that we have to watch out for is fault finding. So that's where you're nitpicking somebody, and maybe they have that fault, but you know, you shouldn't be publicizing that. Or you're nitpicking at them. The Messenger of Allah said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ruined are the hair splitters, ruined are the nitpickers. These people who they just like, attack people for really small details, make a big deal about really small things, and use that to attack somebody's reputation. So fault finding, like, you know, and there's another hadith, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if somebody exposes another person's faults, Allah will expose his fault. And that's, of course, not when the public good is involved. Like if somebody is harming the public good, then you can bring that out in order for the best interest of the public. But, you know, if somebody's just like got bad character, or, you know, they're lazy or whatever, you just don't go around telling people how bad they are. Oh, look how lazy this guy is, or you know, how whatever he did, whatever his flaw is, right? You just cover that up, right? Because you want Allah to cover your faults on the day of judgment as well. So don't nitpick people for their faults or try to find faults with them. That's an evil consequence of debate. And then hypocrisy is a consequence of a debate. So when you say something with your tongue that is not truly in your heart, that's a danger of debate. Rejecting the truth. So if the truth comes from that person and then you reject it just because you feel you're above that person, or you want to destroy that person, or you have some other kind of intention, people who debate and they want to win the debate, they tend to want to reject the truth from their opponent. And that's a very dangerous thing, right? Because that's the definition of arrogance, according to some of the Salaf, is to reject the truth because you feel like you're above the other person, right? And then lastly, showing off. So, you know, people debate to flatter themselves or to be flattered by others, to look cool in front of other people. And then also dishonesty. So people who want to just win the debate, they're going to be dishonest in the way they present facts, in the way they don't acknowledge the truth of the other person. And that's just another big pitfall of the debate. So this is a really good section of Ihya Ulumuddin. I believe it's translated into English as part of the Book of Knowledge, which is at the beginning. So he puts these conditions for the debate. This is what needs to be. These need to be the conditions for Islamic debate. And then these are the evils that come from a debate that is insincere. It's not for the sake of Allah. And there's all these things that come from it.
I mean, this is amazing advice from Imam Ghazali. How do we relate this advice to our present situation?
I think that after, you know, really internalizing and understanding these things that Imam Ghazali is talking about, that you can see a lot of people are not debating for the sake of Allah, or at least that's what it appears like. And, you know, we wanted to make sure that we're not doing that as well. Oh, and lastly, one more point, and I cited this in my thesis about treating others the way you want to be treated. So Imam al-Ghazali says envy is a serious danger of debating, because then a person doesn't love for the other what they love for themselves, right? So when you are debating somebody, you should love for them what you love for yourself. And so think about yourself being in that person's shoes, and like if you were born in that household and you were exposed to those ideas and you had been given those things in your life, would you be any different from them? And And if you were say that you think that person's misguided, why, how would you like to have the Dawah approach you? Like, would you want someone to come and be harsh with you about the truth, or would you want someone to be gentle with you and trying to guide you to the truth, right? So, and that's just important for everything that we do, is always try to treat others the way you want to be treated. Try to imagine yourself in the other person's shoes, what it's like to be the other person. And if I was that person, how would I want them to treat me? That's just a good question to always ask yourself.
Jazakallah khair. That's a really, that's what you described there from Imam Ghazali are some excellent guidelines that we need to employ when thinking about entertaining debates, in particular on social media. I want to pick up on some of those, and in particular the point you make about expertise and the ulama being in a greater position to influence heretical thoughts or problematic thoughts that may pervade the Muslim community. Isn't there a possibility here that we're promoting an elitism when it comes to knowledge and truth, right? Especially at a time where often ulama do promote ideas and ideals or political opinions which are very problematic. I mean, we have seen in the last few years ulama of great repute that would justify war in Yemen. We would see that. I remember at the time of some of the most horrible interventions of the Sisi regime on protesters, peaceful protesters on the street of Egypt, that Azhar would give fatwa which would justify the killing of Muslim brothers, right? And so we find that ulama in very powerful positions are responsible for some great misdeeds, and if we depend upon that sector to highlight the evil, then that may not be forthcoming for all sorts of reasons. There may be political pressure, as you can see in a number of Muslim countries that impress upon ulama to stay in line and to be quiet. So, what is our responsibility in as lay people in the political context we find ourselves in?
Well, I mean, that's a difficult question, and I don't think there's an easy answer. But I would say, there are scholars who do take problematic positions, and that may be, as you suggested, that they're pressured to do so by the government or for a number of other reasons, and maybe they think this is the lesser of two evils or whatever. They might have a reasoning for that. Yeah, those are problematic, and I don't think that any scholar is above question, and that we just need to just uncritically follow anybody. But we do have to rely on the process of peer review, or the process of peer review. So, like, if those scholars are out of line, where are the other scholars going to step up and try to correct them, and do so with the best manners and in the best way, right? And then we take the cues from those people, right, or from those scholars, right? So we have to have a relationship with the scholars, and even those scholars that take problematic political positions, that doesn't mean that what they're teaching about the religion itself is incorrect and that you can't benefit from that, right? So we shouldn't cancel anybody because they're taking a position on this conflict, or they're taking a position on this ruler or anything, because that doesn't mean that the other things that they're saying about the religion is false. It's just they've come to this conclusion that is problematic, and they can be criticized for it, and we should let other scholars criticize them for it. But we cannot sever the relationship between the layman and the scholars, and there has to be trust between the layman and the scholars. And because if we just open that up to let lay people make their own decisions about who is canceled and who is not, and we're going to lose the religion, because you have to learn this religion from scholars. You have to take it from imams. You have to follow one of the four imams, or one of the mujtahid imams, or expert imams, And you can't just like go back to the Quran and Sunnah and derive all of Islam by yourself again. It took generations to build up the scholarly heritage that we have, and we have to make use of that. And I think canceling people is a real danger, because I know who you're talking about. I know you're talking about these scholars that they take these positions, and I disagree with it, and I think that it's wrong, and I don't really understand. They may have a justification for it, and I don't get that. But I do also know that although they have taken these problematic positions, you can go learn your aqidah from them. You can learn how to pray from them. You can learn stories of the Sahaba and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and other scholars of Islam. You can get good things about Islam from those scholars, even though they have taken these positions, right? So I just don't want to. You don't want to just throw out all these scholars just because they take one or two bad positions, or even it's a very bad position, but like they have whole bodies of work, and a lot of their work might be very good, right? But they've fallen short in this other area. So, and we need Allah to forgive us, right, as well. So, I mean, we want Allah to amplify our good, and we want Him to cover up our bad. And I think we should do that with other people. And if these people are going to be criticized, if these scholars who take these positions are going to be criticized, it should be by their peers who are other scholars, and then we can follow those cues.
Now, what about the very important Islamic concepts of enjoining al-ma'ruf and forbidding munkar? We know that Islam placed a great emphasis on the Muslim community enjoining all that is good and repelling all that is evil. And I mean, Imam Ghazali dedicates his Ihya, a chapter in his Ihya, to the importance of these duties. And he makes reference to many of the classical scholars who would be speaking to laymen. And in Imam Shafi'i, for example, I remember reading, was advising an ordinary man, and the man was asking, how do I reach salvation? And he listed a number of things, but at the top of that list, he said, you must enjoin ma'ruf and forbid munkar, right? So how do we contextualize this very Islamic duty in light of what you're saying and the general discussion that Muslims may have on Twitter and elsewhere?
Yeah, good question. So enjoining good and forbidding evil, it is a pillar, or I don't want to say pillar, it's an important principle in the religion. It's a part of the religion for sure, and it's a duty, like it's a fard kifaya, it's a communal duty on Muslims to be able to speak up for what is right and to forbid what is wrong. So, but this has conditions, right? Not everyone is just out there to do this. It has conditions, and the three conditions, and this is mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, may Allah have mercy on him. And he wrote a book, Al-Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. He said, a book on this very topic. And then he mentions a couple of scholars from the Salaf, Sufyan al-Thawri, rahimahullah, and others, and they said that the conditions to enjoin good and forbid evil is, number one, to have knowledge. If you don't have the knowledge, you can't enjoin good or forbid evil, right? Number two is to have gentleness, rifq. So the scholar who is enjoining good and forbidding evil is doing it in a gentle way, and if they have to use force or sternness, they only do that to the measure that is necessary, right? So being gentle and enjoining good and forbidding evil. Remember, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that to Musa alayhi salam, is sending him to Pharaoh to speak to him qawlan layyin, right? A mild word. Speak mildly or easily, gently to Pharaoh, right? So when he's approaching him for the first time, speak gently to him, not come and just denounce him, harsh him. This is Pharaoh, the tyrant, right? So gentleness, they said, is the second one, and then patience is the third one. So knowledge is first. You have to have knowledge before you do it. You have to have gentleness while you do it. You have to have patience after you do it, because then when you enjoin good and forbid evil, you're going to get a negative reaction from people for whatever reason, and you have to be patient in bearing like what they're going to do to you. Like they're going to abuse you, or they're going to curse you, or whatever. You have to be patient with that, and be patient in obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that regard. So that means even if they attack you, you should be forbearing. If they curse you, don't curse them back, right? They insult you, don't insult them back. You have to have this patience, right? So these are the conditions of knowledge and joining good and forbidding evil. Knowledge, gentleness, patience, right? It's mentioned by Ibn Taymiyyah. And I'll tell you something that I learned. And so I've been giving sermons for, almost 10 years maybe. And when I was starting out, I'm a young man, I was bold, and I wanted to speak out against things, right? So I had a sermon, and I speaking out against something, right? And some guy was really angry with me. Brother came up to me, he was very angry afterwards, and I believe I was right, and but I didn't say it, and I shouldn't have said it like that. And I had a mentor at the time, and he told me, when you go up to give the Jumu'ah khutbah, you have to make what you say self-evidently good. It has to be good in itself, and it has to be good in the way you say it, so that nobody can argue with you, right? So when we go to advise people about something that they're doing wrong, you have to make what you're saying self-evidently good. Like, if you are harsh and in a degree that is not warranted, and you're using foul language, and you're not being fair or whatever, they're not going to accept the advice, right? And they'll have a point to argue with you, because they'll say, look, you're having bad manners, right? And so that's why you have to have good manners. So when you're enjoying good. So I want to mention this verse. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Id'u ila sabili rabbika bil hikmati wal maw'izati al hasana wajadilhum billati hiya ahsan." Allah says to call to the way of your Lord with wisdom and with beautiful preaching. Maw'izati al hasana, beautiful preaching, and argue with them in the way that is better, or the way that is best. And so this is really important, because the message that we have there should be hasan, right? It should be beautiful, right? It should look good. And you want to preach to people in a way that they will receive the message, right? In a way that softens their heart and then opens up the message of Islam to them, or the truth, or whatever you're talking about, right? And then to argue with them in a way that is better, right? So you don't want to, if they're insulting you, you don't insult them back, right? If they're using gutter language, or if they're being dishonest, or they're using some low tactic against you, you don't go and do the same thing to them. You need to be above that. Your manners need to be better than theirs, right? So these kind of dog fights, so to speak, on Twitter, where people are just cursing each other and just like throwing punches at each other, it's just that's not beautiful preaching to me. And I don't think a lot of people respond well to that. We as Muslims need to be better and have better manners than the people that we're advising. I'll just say that the people scholars who are enjoining good and forbidding evil in the correct manner, they don't need to justify themselves and say, oh, I'm enjoining good and forbidding evil, right? Because people, this is what I noticed, that, people, they denounce something or something on Twitter or social media, they're denouncing it, and then people are like, why are you such a jerk? Like, why are you so rude? Like, why do you have bad manners? And he's like, oh, I'm enjoining good and forbidding evil, right? And that's the sort of the excuse. And I don't doubt that they sincerely believe that they're enjoining good and forbidding evil, but do they know these conditions? And do they know, like, is this going to be the best for the people that they're trying to advise? Are they trying to advise them, or are they trying to shame them in public, right? Because in Islam, we want to give people nasiha, which is advising them, preferably in private. And nasiha means that you intend good for those people, right? You want them to benefit from the advice you're giving them, right? And some people just want to publicly shame and humiliate other people, and they say, oh, I'm giving you the nasiha, right? That's not nasiha, right? Because your intention was to shame in public and humiliate this person in public and ruin their reputation. And the intention was not to bring them closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that kind of bad advice, right? So what I'm trying to say is that the scholars who are doing this and are doing it in a good manner, they don't have to justify themselves and say, oh, I'm enjoining good and forbidding evil.
Now, that's a very good point, and we can learn a lot from these conditions that you you lay out. Do you not think that the political context we live in is extremely problematic at the moment? We have a West that wants a West. I mean, even that term is problematic, but let's use it for shorthand. That believes that the only Islam that's acceptable would be a submissive, emasculated Islam, and there is certainly an agenda of varying degrees by varying countries, but there is an agenda to reform Islam and to remove what they would term the problematic aspects of Islam, and in that endeavor, a number of Muslims have taken up that cause, right? Now, of course, on the extreme, you've got the ex-Muslims, and I accept completely that, ignoring them is probably the best approach. But also, you've got, Muslims who are in that grey area. They're not in by themselves. People who have got nefarious aims and objectives, but they've taken in this project for various reasons, and they've accepted that there needs to be a reformation of Islam. You have got this reformation agenda, and there are different players, Muslim players in this agenda, and maybe some of the language, and I get your points, and I agree with most, if not all, of your points, but certainly there is a danger of giving this agenda a free pass when we emphasize adab of discussion. What's your take on that?
Yeah, so you're right. There is a reform project. There's academics in the West, and there's liberal Muslims who want to change significant things about the religion. Now, that's a problem. I don't think it's an existential problem like it's going to wipe us out. And so I don't want to give it too much importance. But it is something that I think we need to respond to. And I think a lot of scholars have, for lack of a better word, quote unquote, traditional scholars have responded to this. And it's not that whether we should respond or not, we should. It's just, it should be done in the best way. So some scholars have responded in the academic literature, and other scholars have responded in the popular forum. But you can counterbalance their views, right? So in the United States, we had a Muslim feminist academic, and she said some terrible things about the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, and we had some scholars like Imam Zaid Shakir who gave a khutbah, and he didn't mention her, but he denounced the idea of what she said, and then he refuted it in his sermon, and this is dangerous when you are talking like this about Allah's messengers. Peace and blessings be upon them, right? So I think we need to keep it in the realm of ideas. So let's challenge the ideas. We don't have to go after personalities, right? Because this particular Muslim feminist scholar, she has colleagues who are going to repeat the same thing. So if you take her down, there's going to be others that are going to say the same thing, right? And if you're going after personalities and you're playing whack-a-mole, right? You whack one down and then another one's going to come up, right? So but if you take down the idea, then that counters what they're trying to promote, right? And then if you attack these personalities, if you attack them in a personal manner, it doesn't, the optics are just not looking good on that, right? And a lot of people who are on the fence and who don't know what's happening are going to respond sympathetically to the person who's being attacked, right? I've done this before, and I try to never do this, is to not attack people personally. There's just maybe really rare cases when that's called for. But most of the time, we need to keep it in the realm of ideas.
I mean, can adab be used to close down debate sometimes?
I understand that adab is used to sort of shut down debate. Like, I understand that they do that. But because people do that, just because people do that doesn't mean we should belittle the role of manners in Islam, right? And I want to mention, this is a really important quote from Ibn al-Qayyim. He says, Al-adab huwa ad-deenu kullu. He says, the entire religion is manners, right? The entire religion is manners, because you have manners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's your prayer, your dua, your dhikr, your fasting, and your acts of worship. And then you have manners with people, and you just like upholding people's rights and being a kind person and things like that, right? So all of the religion can be looked at through the view of manners, right? And then he says in the same book, وَحَقِيقَةُ الْأَدَبِ اسْتِعْمَالُ الْخُلُقِ الْجَمِيلِ. He says the reality of manners is to behave with beautiful character. The reality of manners is to behave with beautiful character, right? And so it's to be jameel, right? The way we are behaving with people. And that is what wins hearts. It's not this harsh denouncing people. That doesn't win the hearts. But when you respond to people, even if they disagree with you, whether you do it in a beautiful way, and then they're just like, wow, like they will be amazed by that, right? And that, might begin to start changing their mind, right? Because you were being good to them, right? You had good manners with them. And this is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, idfa' billati hiya ahsan, is, repel the evil with good, right? And then the one who was your enemy will become your friend, right? So if you just are evil on the same level as they are, and you're using the same kind of language that they are, you're not going to win them over, right? And that's not how people are persuaded. If your manners are better than them, right, then they'll start to listen to you, right? And that will soften their hearts and open them up to the message of Islam.
Inshallah. And finally, Justin, there is a need to popularize this adab and this way of discourse that you speak of. How do we do this? I see many young Muslims who fall into the various traps that you've outlined today, especially in the anonymous online environment. And of course, this doesn't serve Islam very well. So how do we popularize this way of thinking? Because it takes a lot for someone to accept this approach to debate.
Right. So I believe that the solution to this is in the model of our Salaf. We need to study manners and knowledge, manners and good character and ethics as its own subject, besides the other things, besides aqidah, except for the basics in prayer and basic fiqh and things like that. I'm talking about people need to become experts in manners before they become experts in aqidah, creed, or theology, or law, or fiqh, or anything like that. And he also has another statement I want to mention, because he said, and he's talking to Ashabul Hadith, right? So at the time, there's the group, the people of Hadith, right? And they were kind of distinguished from the people of right, or people of, like, I don't know how to translate that. People of opinions, not really the best translation, but the people who are of sort of rational logic kind of things. There's just two different schools of thought in Islam. There are the people who are more literalist and the people who are more about using legal principles to drive rules. So, and those were kind of the Hanafis and the Hanbalis and in between. And so, anyway, but he was around, and so he was talking to Ashabul Hadith, those are the people of Hadith, and he said, Antum ila qalilin min al-adabi ahwaju minkum ila kathirin min al-ilm. He says, you, people of Hadith, are in greater need of a little bit of manners than you are a lot of knowledge, right? You are in need of a little bit of manners more than you are in need of a lot of knowledge, right? And this is an era when people were debating and there were fault lines, right? So he's telling them, it'd be better if you had manners than if you know a whole bunch of hadith but you don't have manners, like, that's not very good for you, right? So if you knew less hadith but you had more manners, that would be better, right? So I think that's how it has to be. And so we need to sort of revive the study of manners. So for example, Al-Ghazali, he has a book called Bidayat al-Hidayah. Bidayat al-Hidayah. It's translated into English. It's the beginning of guidance. And it's a really good book. And he explains in here, like, okay, you want to become like a spiritual person, you want to become closer to Allah, and he's going to tell you how to do it. And he doesn't begin with aqidah. He doesn't begin with the details of prayer. He begins with setting up your routine, right? This is the beginning of guidance, setting up your routine. So what is the adab of getting up in the morning? What is the adab of Fajr prayer? What is the adab of what you do between Fajr and Dhuhr? What is the adab of when you're in your house? What is the adab when you eat, when you sleep, and so on and so on and so on, right? And the adab of the people that you surround you with and how you behave with them, and and understanding the sins of the heart, like envy, right? And being aware of anger, and being aware of these kind of arrogance and spiritual things like that you need to avoid. So his whole, that book is all about is like, okay, you want to begin, you want to be guided, you have to begin with this adab, right? So, and that's a great book, and I go back to that book, and I can't apply all that stuff. I mean, he maps out like the perfect routine that you would have and the perfect behavior that you would have like throughout your day, right? Perfect, you wake up for Fajr and you pray and you're doing Quran and you're doing beneficial things all day, and you go to sleep and you're remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the whole time, and you're behaving with people well. He maps it out perfectly. I mean, it's really difficult to would be to implement all of it. So I just try to do like add little bits of it to my personal routine. But that's where it begins. Like that's where the guidance begins. It begins in your personal behavior, right? And if you have to have that personal behavior and that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and a routine of worship and an understanding of like the etiquette and the manners and the character values that are in Islam, you have to become an expert in those things before you can really be an expert in other sciences in a way that allows you to debate them with other people. Because these debates with bad manners are just bad news for everyone. It's for the people involved and the people that are watching it, right? So I think that we need to follow that kind of approach. Like we need to focus more on manners. I mean, like what kind of routine that you have, like what kind of things should you be doing throughout the day? What kind of worship, extra acts of worship should we be doing in addition to the 5 daily prayers? Like, and getting people to see that this is what an imam looks like. This is what Imam Malik looks like. This is what Abu Hanifa looks like. They would get up and they would pray and they would do this and they would be dhikr and they would do beneficial knowledge and they would study, and they're doing everything good throughout their day. These are the imams that we're supposed to follow, and these are their personal routines. And we need to understand that this is how an imam is supposed to behave. This is how a good Muslim believer is supposed to behave, and try to implement that ourselves. And then when we do that, then we can move on to the higher sciences of Islam. But it really starts with that basic thing, and I think that's what we have to drill that into young people. And I know a lot of people aren't going to accept that because they have a conception of Islam, and it's tied up with politics, it's tied up with Aqidah debates and things like that. And once you go down that rabbit hole, it's what we call a compound ignorance. So you have several misconceptions that layer each other. It's really hard to unwind all that kind of stuff. And so people who have already gone down that rabbit hole and have this misconception of Islam that they're promoting, and they're very harsh in their approach, and they're not beneficial in their approach. It's really hard to untangle all of those misconceptions and get them back to the beginning where they're just focusing on adab, right? So I don't know how to help those people, but with our youth, we need to begin by showing them that this is the spiritual path, this is the adab that you would have, this is what a good Muslim, this is how they spend their day and what they do, get popularizing Riyadh Salihin, for example, by Imam Nawawi, Adab al-Mufrad by Imam al-Bukhari, like these books that were written just for the lay people to read the hadith about manners and things like that, right? So, and then to be models ourselves, like we need to model the senior scholars because they're at the higher level than we are, and they're in their behavior and their knowledge. The living imams, but also the imams that passed away, and we can read about them, to model their behavior, and then we need to try and be a model for ourselves. So I'm trying to be a model for my children. I try to model my online behavior for others. And I'm not a perfect person. I'm not going to say I'm a perfect example. I'm doing my best. but that's how we have to do it. And just drilling the importance of that. Like, manners isn't like a secondary thing. Like, Ibn al-Qayyim says manners is the entire religion, right? And Al-Ghazali, that was the first thing that he's talking about. He's writing a treatise on how to begin your guidance. You begin it with adab, right, in your daily routine.
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your time and your knowledge today, inshallah.
Ameen. Jazakallah khair. Thank you.
Just one last announcement. Do remember to subscribe to this podcast and do leave a review on iTunes if you listen to the program on iTunes. But until next week, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.